All right, so I just want to provide somewhat of an update on the whole Ukraine conflict and give a little bit of an analysis on what I think you will see coming here within the next couple weeks. Over the last week or so, a few days, it's been made well aware that Russian forces have pulled away from Kiev and starting to regroup over in the eastern regions of Ukraine. Now, this can be for a couple different reasons. What the common opinion seems to be, and the one of our government here in the United States, seems to be that there's going to be a major offensive in the eastern regions of Ukraine. I believe that's actually true, 100% actually. I believe it's inevitable. Now, what is the primary objectives and where is this going to lead to? Well, Putin came out a little bit earlier today and said that peace negotiations with the West were dead and that they were going to continue this fight. Now, we're all well aware that days leading into this invasion, Putin basically declared independence for the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Another interesting move by Putin just recently was pegging the ruble to gold. The ruble lost a lot of its value when Russia was slapped with sanctions when they immediately went into Ukraine. We all are well aware of the European Union's dependency on Russian oil. They don't have any alternative at the moment other than weaning themselves off very slowly of that dependency. So they have to continue to purchase Russian oil. A lot of that oil, when I say oil, I'm actually including oil, gas, fuel, diesel, all that stuff. So bear with me. But a lot of that is farm diesel. Farm diesel is used on farms, right, to operate tractors and other farm equipment. And the price of that is skyrocketing. Russia also is a major importer of fertilizer. Brazil imports 25% of its fertilizer. Brazil is a major agriculture hub for the entire world. 21% of their total fertilizer use, not just their imports, but Brazil's total fertilizer use, is imported from Russia. Russia has halted all exports of ammonium nitrate products, which fertilizer basically. Here's what else you got to understand. Ukraine is responsible for roughly 11.5% of the world's wheat production. Russia responsible for roughly 16%. The European Union as a whole is the number one wheat producer. Now, the United States is very high up there, China's up there, and India's up there. Africa, I believe 30% of their entire wheat is imported from Ukraine. 80% of which goes to Egypt, Egypt gets 80% of their wheat from Ukraine. Ukraine is not exporting any wheat this year. So there's going to be a major shortage of wheat in Africa, which means there could be a big risk of famine potentially. African countries are trying to combat this by fixing prices for food, but also they don't want to buy wheat from Russia. This could be, morally they don't want to, but also if any of these countries have spoken out against Russia and condemned the invasion, Putin didn't just say that unfriendly countries had to pay for oil with the ruble. He said they had to pay for any commodity with the ruble. So the ruble is strengthening, this shows, and the only alternative when these countries that probably were not holding a lot of rubles in their reserves, they have to pay in gold, which means Russia is probably going to start raking in and increasing the gold reserve that they have. So I don't see Russia having a liquidity crisis anytime soon. Also, by the way, there's talks about Russia being on the verge of default. Russia's debt to GDP, their GDP and debt, or debt as a percentage of GDP, I apologize, I'm doing this off the top of my head, is only 18%. Their economy is roughly the size of Italy. It's around the size of what Canada's is. Canada, their national debt is around 40 to 44% of their GDP, and Italy is around 130%. The United States runs a 133% debt to its GDP. I'm just putting it in comparison. Russia also has enough money and gold in reserves to pay their debt outright. The only way they will go into default is if the U.S. keeps a freeze on their attempted payments, which is what they're doing. So they're going to force them into default, not because Russia's not trying to pay it, which they are, and not because they don't have the means to pay it, which they do. It's only because the U.S. won't allow them to pay it. There's talks, Russia has said, they're going to sue the United States and the EU if it's forced to go into default because of that very reason. So there's really not a lot of default risk with Russia. The other thing, an FSB agent came out not long ago as a whistleblower, and take this with a grain of salt. But he stated that China was going to invade Taiwan this fall. They had an anniversary coming up, and a big announcement was going to be made, and that announcement was the reunification of Taiwan. I think you have a few different things going on here, and this is me speculating, but hear me out. If you look at how the West has acted towards Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we are not physically getting involved. At least we're saying we're not. We are giving them supplies, we're giving them money and everything else. But then they slapped a lot of sanctions on Russia as well. They say not to deter. Obviously, we know it was to try and deter, but it hasn't worked. China was wanting to see how the West reacted to that kind of conflict. This FSB agent said that she was not happy with Putin's decision to invade. And he did ask him to wait until after the Olympics, which Putin did. Not long after the Olympics, though. But he ultimately wasn't happy and actually has delayed, I guess, his ultimate timeline to try and take Taiwan. But he's looking to see, okay, the West slapped these sanctions on. Here's the other thing. Russia and China have a alliance now. This has been building up for, a little while. But it's become pretty close lately. Regardless of what China says about Russia, and regardless of what Russia says about China in the open, they're working together. I'm going to show you a picture here. And this is a picture of Ukraine's agricultural map. And where a lot of their wheat is grown. See this green area, this dark green? That is some of their prime agricultural land. There's also a lot of industry in this region. The eastern portion of this, so this very, and I thought I was pointing at it, but on the very eastern point is that Donetsk, Luhansk region there. Then you have that eastern portion. The Dnipro River splits Ukraine in half. In Russia's defense doctrine, it says that they want to secure year-round access to the Black Sea. They want to guarantee markets for its goods. And I also believe that they're looking, at least in the short term, I'm not saying it's the overall goal, but in the short term, to capture that eastern region at all cost. If they can capture that eastern region, it would give them over 25% of the world's wheat production. When you put it into layman's terms and you think about how it's split up, production-wise across the entire world, that is a major market share. Almost monopolistic. That would give them substantial leverage as well. As far as Africa, that supply needs to be made up somewhere. And if Africa can't pay in rubles or they don't want to buy from Russia, they have to go get it from the EU or the US. Or they can get it from India or China. But China's, I'll go into that in a second, they're not going to get it from China. So that's going to force the United States to increase wheat production and the EU to increase wheat production. That means they have to reallocate resources towards wheat that they would be growing other crops with. That's where you could potentially see food shortages and increased prices. Russia, like I said, has halted exports of fertilizer. So fertilizer supply is down and demand is way, way up. Cost of production for agriculture is going to skyrocket. It's going to really hurt small family farms here in the United States for sure, but it's going to hurt everybody. Food prices are going to keep going up, and inflation, which was at 8.5% today and well above what their estimates were, is going to keep going up. The only way to combat this is for the Fed to recalculate their target rates, and they're going to have to go even higher, and that may not settle it down. But if he can capture that eastern region, it does two things. Again, it gives them a large share of that wheat. But I think China wants him to do that as well. Because not only is there a lot of industry, there's a lot of resources, there's wheat production, there's oil. When China decides to go take Taiwan, and they're in alliance with Russia, when the U.S. decides to sanction China, they're going to go to Russia and they're going to supplement with all of the resources that Russia's gaining in Ukraine. Here's a map of the Russian advance so far. This is from just April 7th, I believe, so a couple days ago. I'll make this bigger. And the red is where Russia controls. And this may be a slightly bit different now, but not much. They're out of Kyiv, I believe, but really this red area. And you can see where they're building, trying to push in. I believe they'll even push down here to Odessa. That would give them both sides of the Dnipro River. And maybe even northwards a little bit. But for sure, everything south of Kharkiv to the Dnipro River and that whole region there. To Donetsk and Luhansk and all that. So this is where I think it's going. I don't know if they will be successful. I think it's going to take a lot. I think they are in a fight that they did not expect to have. And ultimately, it could result in the use of deadlier weapons. What weapons those are, I'm not 100% sure. But there is an investigation right now regarding the use of chemical weapons. I think it actually came out. Someone told me that wasn't... was it sarin, or I don't know the actual kind of gas they would use, but it was actually phosphorus, which is used pretty widely in war zones. It's not illegal to use in war zones, but it is deadly if it's dropped on civilians and in population areas, for sure. So it's not necessarily right. It's still fucked up, but it's not unheard of. But if you think about it, the West could be saying that these gas attacks are happening to prepare us, for the event that they actually do happen. When you listen back on what Biden has said his reaction will be and what NATO's reaction will be if Russia reverts to chemical weapons, according to him, the response would be in kind. Now, to me, that sounds like what we're going to start gassing Russia. I doubt it. I don't know what we would do, to be honest. I don't think we'll do anything. But just be aware that could happen. But going back to China, if China was truly planning on invading Taiwan, maybe they still have that same timeline. And a lot of this is them watching the West to see how we handle it. They know we would sanction them. Here's the other thing. If Taiwan is invaded, that would have a lot larger impact on the U.S. economy and the world's economy than Ukraine has. I believe the majority of our chips for cars and stuff are made in Taiwan as well. It's a big trade hub for us, and I'm not gonna say we would get involved, but I'm almost pretty sure we would. So I wouldn't put it past us. It would be a lot bigger deal. And if you look at the estimates, you see the death and destruction that's going on in Ukraine. There are estimates that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan could be 100,000 plus deaths in the first week. So, again, could end up being a bigger conflict. But yes, I do believe that some, not all, but some of Russians' decisions, at least from here on out in that eastern region, are being monitored heavily by China and are maybe even being influenced by China and what their objectives are. That wheat production, that industry, that oil would all help Russia. Russia's not going to stop selling to the EU anytime soon. The ruble's going to continue to get stronger. They're going to continue to grow their reserves. By the way, there's no liquidity risk with Russia going back on the gold standard like there would be here in the United States, because they have a monopoly in Europe for sure as far as gold mining goes, and the largest, if not one of the largest, gold reserves in the world. So you have to take that into consideration too. Gold is also now used for other things than just money and jewelry. It's used for in electronics, so there's always a demand for it. I don't think it's a long-term fix. I think this is a temporary decision by them, but it could be a smart one. It's definitely going to, it definitely undermines the US dollar, because before this, everyone that was settling transactions for internationally in oil was using the US dollar, hence the petrodollar. This cuts out, the EU is a very big oil market, and 2/3 of Russian oil exports goes to the EU. So Russia's not losing any revenue, and it undermines the international demand for the dollar. The other interesting thing to look out for is Saudi Arabia's ambition to potentially start accepting the yuan for oil transactions instead of the dollar. That would be another major hit to the strength of the US dollar. But I think China has to pass a few tests financially first. They have to be a lot more open about their finances, like the URs, or like the US is. Again, this is a lot of this is speculation, but I think this is what you're going to see play out. So don't be shocked. Keep an eye on it. I'm always, looking at what's going on. And hopefully Ukraine keeps kicking that ass like they have been. But if they do, that also gives Putin, it kind of backs him into a corner and may drive him to use deadlier weapons. I wouldn't be shocked if we see that. I think that these next couple weeks are going to be very tough on the Russians and the Ukrainians. It's going to be very destructive. And like I said, as of today, it doesn't look like Putin has the heart to talk about ending this anytime soon. So I'm going to stop there. Going to have another video up tomorrow. And make sure you subscribe, please. If I offered you value, hit the little button on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and I appreciate it. Thank you.